The night was a velvet shroud, cloaking the suburb in a silence that hid its sins. I'm Nora, a ghost in this quiet neighborhood, always watching, always catching the moments people think they've buried. My living room window faces their patio, a candlelit corner, where secrets hum like the flicker of a dying flame. I didn't mean to see what I saw, but some stories sink their hooks into you and don't let go. This one started with a touch, a sigh, and a betrayal that burned brighter than the stars. Her name was Julia, late 30s, with a body that moved like a whisper and eyes that held a restless fire. She was married to Greg, a man who lived for his job, leaving her to navigate the empty nights alone. But it was his friend Ethan who filled the air with danger. Ethan was early 30s, all lean strength and quiet charm, with hands that knew more than they should. That night, Greg was on a late shift, and Julia was on the patio, her silk shawl slipping off her shoulders, her hair loose and catching the candlelight. Ethan was there too, offering a shoulder rub, his presence like a spark in a dry field. I was in my living room, a glass of wine in hand, the suburbs quiet, a low hum in my ears. Their patio was lit by candles, the soft glow catching Julia's silhouette as she sat on a cushioned chair, her shawl barely clinging to her frame. Ethan stood behind her, his hands kneading her shoulders, his fingers strong but gentle. "You're tense," he said, his voice low, carrying across the yard. She sighed, her head tilting back, and I saw the shift in her posture, the way her body softened under his touch. My wine glass trembled in my hands, but I didn't look away. His hands lingered slow and deliberate, and she froze, her breath catching. The candlelight cast a warm glow over her skin, highlighting the curve of her neck, the dip of her collarbone. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft, trembling like she was fighting herself. He didn't answer, just let his hands slide lower, grazing the edges of her shawl. And I saw the spark, fear, desire, the kind of hunger that drowns out reason. My heart quickened, my glass cold against my fingers. This wasn't just a friendly gesture, it was a fuse, and they were lighting it. Julia's hand reached up, brushing his, and he didn't pull away. Instead, he stepped closer, his fingers tracing the line of her spine, bold but silent. The suburb was silent, but their world was alive, charged with a heat that had nothing to do with the summer night. I should have turned away, should have closed my curtains and let them have their sin. But I stayed, my eyes locked on them, my pulse a traitor. I lit a cigarette, the flame trembling as I watched them teeter on the edge of something they couldn't take back. The patio was a stage now, the candlelight casting shadows that danced with their desire. Julia sat in the chair, her shawl slipping further, the silk clinging to her curves like a lover's hands. Ethan was close, too close, his hands sliding lower, his fingers digging into her lower back, claiming something he had no right to. I watched from my living room window, my cigarette burning low, my heart pounding like I was the one crossing the line. The night was still, but their world was electric, alive with the tension between them. "Julia," he said, his voice a low growl, and she shivered, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. "Greg's not here," she whispered, but it was a lie and they both knew it. His hands moved lower still under the silk, and she gasped, her head tilting back, exposing the line of her throat. I could see it, all the way her lips parted, the way his fingers traced her skin, the way their bodies leaned into each other like they were starving. My cigarette ash fell, my breath caught as I watched them slide deeper into the abyss. The candlelight flickered, casting a golden glow over her skin, highlighting the sweat on her brow. His lips grazed her neck, slow, deliberate, and she leaned into him, her hands moving to his wrists, not to stop him, but to hold him there. The shawl slipped to the ground, revealing the curve of her waist, and I felt the heat of it secondhand, but just as potent. I thought of Greg working late, trusting her, loving her. I thought of the life they'd built, the promises she was breaking. But here she was, letting Ethan's hands roam, letting his touch unravel her. The suburb's quiet was gone, replaced by the sounds from the patio, her soft gasps, his low murmurs, the rustle of fabric as her dress shifted under his hands. His touch was bolder now, sliding down her thighs, pulling her closer against the chair. She didn't stop him. Instead, she arched into him, her breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. My own breath was shallow, my heart racing with a mix of shame and fascination. I was just a neighbor, a stranger, but their desire was pulling me under. Ethan's lips found her shoulder, leaving marks she'd have to hide, and she yielded, her body melting in a way that screamed betrayal. The candlelight caught the sweat on her skin, the tension in his arms, and I saw the guilt in her eyes, a flicker of doubt that was quickly drowned by want. My cigarette burned my fingers, and I cursed under my breath, my eyes still locked on them. The suburb was asleep, but I was awake, a witness to their sin, my own longing, a traitor I couldn't silence. They moved closer, their bodies a rhythm that was both reckless and inevitable. The chair creaked, the candlelight flickered, and I saw the urgency in their movements, the knowledge that Greg could return, could call, could break this moment. "Don't stop," she whispered, her voice raw, desperate, and I felt it like a jolt, the intimacy of it, the sin of it. I wanted to turn away, to close my curtains and pretend I'd seen nothing, but I couldn't. Their desire was a drug, and I was hooked. The patio was a haze now. The candlelight dimmed the air, thick with their heat. Julia and Ethan were tangled, her shawl gone, her body pressed against the chair, his hands claiming her like she was his. I watched from my living room window, my cigarette long gone, my heart pounding like I was the one in his arms. The night was quiet, but their world was loud, alive with the sounds of their desire. Breaths, sighs, the creak of the chair under their weight. The suburb slept, but I was awake, caught in their fire. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking, a plea and a surrender all at once. He didn't answer, just pressed closer, his lips on her throat, slow and deliberate, leaving marks that would haunt her come morning. I could see it all, the curve of her spine, the sweat on his brow, the way her legs shifted, pulling him closer. My own breath caught my hands, trembling as I gripped the windowsill, my eyes. Traitors. I wasn't supposed to feel this way, wasn't supposed to let their sins seep into me, but it did, raw and unfiltered. The candlelight buzzed, casting shadows that danced with their movements. His hands were bolder now, sliding down her body, exploring every inch, and she gasped, her nails digging into his arms. The sound was intimate, too intimate, and I felt like an intruder, but I couldn't stop watching. I thought of Greg working late, trusting her, loving her. I thought of the promises she'd made, the life she was betraying. But here she was, giving herself to Ethan, letting him take her apart piece by piece. His lips moved down her chest, slow, deliberate, and she arched into him, her breath coming in sharp, desperate gasps. "Keep going," she murmured, her voice raw, urgent, and I felt the weight of it, the sin of it, like a blade in my chest. The candlelight caught the sweat on her skin, the tension in his arms, and I saw the guilt in her eyes, a flicker of doubt that was quickly drowned by desire. My living room was cold, but their world was bright, electric, and I was caught in its pull, my heart racing with a mix of shame and fascination. They moved together, their bodies a rhythm that was both beautiful and damned. The chair creaked, the candlelight flickered, and I saw the urgency in their movements, the knowledge that time was theirs for now, but not forever. His hands were on her hips now, pulling her closer, and she let him, her body yielding, her eyes bright with want. The kiss that followed was fierce, hungry, a collision of desire and regret. I wanted to scream, to bang on my window and stop them, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the heat of their moment. The suburb was silent, but their patio was alive with the sounds of their sin breaths, sighs, the creak of the chair. I was complicit, watching from the dark, my living room, a silent stage for their fall. The night was theirs, and I was just a shadow, a keeper of their betrayal, my own longing, a traitor I couldn't silence. The suburb stirred, but I was still there, stained by what I'd seen, my heart heavy with their secret. The patio was a world apart now, the candlelight fading, the air heavy with the aftermath of their sin. Julia and Ethan were still tangled, her body pressed against the chair, his hands resting on her hips, possessive, reluctant to let go. The silence was thick, broken only by their ragged breaths, the soft rustle of fabric as they shifted. I watched from my living room window, my wine glass empty, my heart heavy with their secret. The suburb was waking, the first hints of dawn creeping in, but the weight of what I'd seen was eternal. "Julia," he said, his voice low, almost tender, but there was no tenderness in what they'd done. She opened her eyes, her gaze heavy with guilt and satisfaction, and looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. His hand traced her jaw, slow, possessive, and she leaned into it, her body still yielding even now. The candlelight swayed, catching the glow, and I saw the marks on her skin, the way her shawl was a forgotten heap on the ground. It was over, but it wasn't. Their story would linger in her eyes, in his touch, in the lies they'd tell. I thought of Greg working late, trusting her, loving her, unaware of the fire burning on his patio. I thought of the life they'd built, the promises she was breaking. But here she was, tangled in Ethan's arms, her body marked by his hands, her heart torn between want and regret. The guilt was there in the way her fingers hesitated before touching his face, but it wasn't enough to undo what they'd done. They'd burned too bright, and now they'd have to live with the ashes. Ethan kissed her again, softer this time, like he was trying to hold on to the moment before it slipped away. She let him, her hands sliding down his chest, lingering, as if she could keep him there, keep this fire alive. But the night was ending, the suburb, waking up, the first cars humming in the distance. They pulled apart, slow, reluctant, and she stood smoothing her dress, her shawl still on the ground. He watched her, his eyes dark, unreadable, and I felt the weight of it, the truth they'd have to carry. I stepped back from the window, my living room dark, the suburb stirring outside. They'd go back to their lives, Julia to Greg, to the life she was supposed to live, Ethan to his charm, his friendship, his secrets. But I'd seen it, the fire, the fall, and it would stay with me, a wound that wouldn't heal. The dawn was breaking, but it didn't feel clean. It felt heavy, like the weight of their sin and mine. I closed my curtains, the suburb's lights fading in the morning haze. Their story was over for now, but it wasn't finished. It would linger in the way Julia moved, in the lies she'd tell, in the guilt that would eat at her. And I'd carry it too, a shadow across the yard, a keeper of their betrayal. The suburb woke, but I was still there, stained by what I'd seen, my heart heavy with their secret. So what do you think? Did this story burn you like it burned me? Smash that like button if you felt the heat, or drop a comment if you've got a secret that's tearing you apart. Not feeling it? Tell me why I can handle it. Subscribe for more raw, real tales that'll keep you hooked, and share this with someone who loves a scandal as much as you do. Until next time, keep those secrets tight. Or maybe let them slip.